So thank you very much for those of you dialing in. This is going to be a 30-minute overview of how to be heard in your remote IEP meetings. We'll have a short presentation here, then get into any questions that people might have. If you have questions, please ask them in the comments section. We'll do our best to go over as many as we can during the session today. If there are other questions there about your situation individually, please feel free to send a direct message to IEP Equity, and hopefully someone will get back to you right away with those questions as well. But again, as you're going, feel free to use the comments to ask any questions as we're going. We'll do our best to get as many as we can now, and then get others as we can over time here. So thank you very much for joining in today. The Right now, I'm Chris Draper. I'm a mediator for IEP Equity. As a mediator, what our role is we support the IE teams helping bridge the communication gap that exists in some IEP meetings. One of the communication gaps that we are now seeing, regardless of technology, whether you're using Zoom, GoToMeeting, Hangouts, Skype, or Eyes On, there is a skill to being heard on video that's important to understand and important to be comfortable with, which is what we're going over today. Now, IEP meetings traditionally we're most used to the parent and the IEP team will join each other in the same room and sit down and really be talking face to face. Since the 2004 reauthorization of IDEA, however, that hasn't been required. The conduct of meetings since 2004 has very clearly stated that these conferences, anything else you need to do around the IEP, that as long as the parent and the school agree, you can use video conference, teleconference, you can use other means to virtually meet. This, as we've seen recently, becomes very important in the context of the 2017 clarification from Department of Ed, which says if you have a school that's providing any services to any of the students, we also need to be providing those special needs services as well, which means we're going to have to understand how to effectively use video and how to make sure that we're using that video in a manner that's going to be as useful as possible for those students, as useful as possible to make sure everyone is effectively heard. So now, if we think through our in-person meetings, there's a lot to the meeting that isn't just what's said. I think we all know this, and I think that's why we all agree that in-person meetings a lot of times are the preferred method of meeting. Because if I'm talking to another person across the table, if I'm seeing them across the table, it's not just the literal words that are spoken, it's how are they said? What's the voice behind them? The eye contact, the facial expression. If someone says a certain thing and says, "Oh, I'm happy," but you can sort of see on the face they're not, or the eyes are going all over the place, they're not looking at you. These are the types of nonverbal cues that start to give us an understanding of what's actually said. It's the gestures, it's the body movements, the postures. These are things that we all innately understand, interpret. This is the reading between the lines that we get face to face that becomes very, very important. Included in those nonverbals is also, space and touch. Hopefully, the rooms are large enough that these don't become issues, and there isn't a lot of touch issues anyway. However, when we start going to video, it's very important to understand that while we still get the words, there's a lot of nonverbal cues that do not come through. For example, there's no access to really touch or space. We're all on the other side of a computer. Body movement and posture. There's some ability to see that, but really it's nothing that we actually can interpret to a point where we can see it enough. And more importantly, some of the things that we use video for have access to being misinterpreted when coming through video. Gestures. I'm a person, as you can see, loves using hands. You can sort of see my thumb going around here, but you can't really get the full effect of my gestures. Eye contact. In video, especially when we have these sort of Brady Bunch layouts, it's very difficult to figure out, is the eye contact them just looking somewhere else? Because you don't have that human, the gravity of relating to another human, you don't have the same intention to make the eye contact, the facial expressions. It's very easy when a human isn't in front of you to actually make facial expressions you don't expect. Voice, hearing the underlaying pieces behind it are a lot harder. Most importantly, we get pieces of them, fragments of them, and if we take our perspective from the real world, it's very easy to misinterpret these nonverbal cues that we've depended on for so long in so many ways. So when we start to think about video, we need to start thinking about, if I have a bunch of nonverbal cues that I don't have, and I have others that have really good access to being, misinterpreted, we need to shift our focus from trying to be misunderstood. We can no longer worry about that as a metric. Do not try to be do not try to be understood using the old techniques, and force yourself to think about, we need to ensure we're not misunderstood. And what we mean by is that video is going to change how we communicate. We have to, when we're communicating via video, we have to be more important to spend the time to have a plan. Know what you want to say. It's far more important to have that plan than it is in person, where we can work off each other, we can survive off each other and play off each other a little bit more and understand where things go. Um, we need to be patient. We need to be much more patient on video. There's no unspoken openings the same way that there are in real life. There's maybe someone slumps in their chair in real life and you can sort of see it out of the corner of your eye, or someone starts tapping the table in a certain way that you can see in real life. These unspoken openings aren't there. We have to be far more patient to listen, to hear, to interpret what the room is doing through video in different ways. Most importantly, we need to be deliberate, far more deliberate. Say it, note it, confirm it. If someone says something on video, we need to make sure we can't read between the lines anymore. We need to make sure that we are clear, specific, and deliberate in what we've heard. These are the three major ways that video changes how we need to communicate. The balance of that is it also changes the balance. There are a lot of opportunities to have perceived or accidental often imbalances in a room. When a parent shows up and the rest of the IEP team is there, if the parent isn't as comfortable in the environment, if it's one of the early IEP meetings for someone, there can be this perceived imbalance that the other side, they may all know something you don't. It's that having that inside communication thing that may be perceived by a parent, that within a room can cause some communication gaps. There's accidental imbalances. For example, most of the IEP team are professionals. They're in the IEP team because they're very good at what they've done. They've done it for years. They know how to communicate well together. And sometimes they'll communicate in nonverbal cues in ways that can make others feel like they're on the outside. And these are accidental imbalances often, that come from the nonverbals within the room. Rarely you'll see some intentional imbalances where there may be a situation where things have gotten on the wrong foot to start, and so one side may want to make sure a position is pushed over another, but those are really rare. Typically what we see in the room are perceived or accidental imbalances that come from where all the benefits of nonverbals are there. We get access to imbalances because of those nonverbals as well. When we start getting to video, video favors a prepared and everyone is equally isolated, which means we're rebalancing the room in a lot of ways, where if we are prepared, patient, and deliberate, it can be very useful for parties to feel that sort of sense of empowerment if we use it smartly and if we use it in a way that's effective with the medium. Now, there's a few big things when we're dealing with video. So practically speaking, no matter what platform you're using, there's a few big don'ts that we're going to go over first before we go into a few of the really best practice do's. So as far as don'ts, do not ever under any circumstances record without permission. There are rules and ways that we should all have access to record meetings. There are notices and approvals, and just getting everyone on the same page with recording. Recording is not bad in itself. What makes video different in recording is There are states that are one-sided states and two-sided states where it can be a federal crime in certain states to record without permission. This can extend to maybe you have two parents are in different locations. One of the parents is traveling, that, versus the other. They're not in the room, so they need to be engaged over video. They may be in a state where if they are recorded without their permission and consent, that is a federal crime. Please, please, please do not record without permission. And please make sure if we are recording on video that once you're recording, we get everyone's confirmation that they agree that they're being recorded. This is more important in video because you're outside the realm of education here with respect to those rules. That's a very, very big don't. Please, please, please take the time to get that piece right up front. The second big one, don't overtalk or interrupt. In video, it just wastes time. In real life, there's situations where the way people interact, there can be one person starts speaking, another will, back down, or there can be pieces there. In video, it just wastes time. Depending on the system you're using, in some cases, trying to overtalk over someone else just cuts you out. So no one can hear you anyways. You're just talking to air. This is when we're talking about being patient and being deliberate. That is what gets us to don't overtalk, don't interrupt. We will get to some techniques and the do's of how we deal with people that just keep going and going. But overtalking or interrupting on video technologically can cause you problems because you're not able to make the progress you think you're making. And again, it just takes time for everyone to get back on the page and get to one speaker at a time. Our third big don't is never forget you're always on camera. This is something every one of us has challenges with when we start out. Because we're not in the room, we aren't having that same, again, gravitas to that other human. We aren't feeling that connection as much. So sometimes our faces very easily provide frustration, or our frustration, depending on how big the image is that you've blown the person up. If you've got this on the big screen and one person is sitting there and either forgets the camera's on or they have little frustration ticks or something in their appearance, those become very, very big. Please always remember you're on camera. Never forget that you're on camera when you're on video. But so keeping these three big things up front, the next one is, what do we want to do? Now, looking at when we're going to use video effectively, if we're going to use video as a tool, given its ability to rebalance a room, its ability to let those who are prepared and deliberate use the tool effectively, our first big do, speak in short bursts. No one likes a long, rambling documentary going on for ages. Keep it concise if you know what you're going to say. Identify it. Give that point that space to breathe. Speak in short bursts. For example, if we're reading off Moby Dick, call me Ishmael. That part's important. The rest of it, let's not worry about it right now. Let's give everyone their turn once we know that most important piece of the conversation, and let's keep going in these short bursts that we can collaborate best on. Next big key, do take notes as you go. If you heard it, note it. It's easy on video conference to sort of get sucked into being a passenger sometimes. We still need to be as deliberate in our note taking as we are in real life. Have the piece of paper, have the pencil out if you're going to take notes that way. Again, we don't want to be over talking people or interrupting. So as a result, we need to make sure we're very deliberate if we hear something, we should do this for X hours per X. Well, write that down. Make sure you have it so that as we give that individual their turn to speak on video, we can immediately come back to it and we can immediately be most effective with it. Which leads us to the third most important part, anchoring actions and comments. We want to be able to fence post our conversations. We want to be able to fence post our points within the comments section, which is a very important and valuable tool for those who are prepared when using video. It's something you do not have in the real world. This is one of those rebalancing pieces that makes up for the loss of our nonverbal cues, for loss of being able to interpret what someone is saying between the lines. video conferencing provides that opportunity to anchor actions in the comments section. What we mean by that is, regardless of what tool you're using, whether you're using Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, all these, there's going to be a section that has an opportunity to pull up comments. These comments are, it just looks like a little chat box, and these are naturally going to be going to all members of the team, and you should always have that comments box up, because as things come up that are important, we want to provide those little fence posts, those anchors for the meeting into comments. Comments is not a place to have a discussion, have a side argument on what's happening. We don't want to detract from what's happening. What we want is those little bursts of, oh, they said this in here. This is going to be important. We need to make sure we discuss this before we leave the room. What does this in section X mean? Which report is section Y based on? Those points that we need to make sure, these are going to be on my agenda. This is our tick list of what we need to get done. Please put those little anchors into comments, because when we use the comments, we don't interrupt the speaker, we don't interrupt, we don't overtalk, we don't waste time, but if we use them, they're visible to everyone. Everyone can see them. They're a little tool, like a punch list, throughout the part of this discussion where we can actually make sure that all the points each side wants to make are able to be raised before we leave. And they offer that to-do list, that transparent to-do list in a dynamic manner. So as things go on, you may have had a bunch of things that you prepared for to discuss before you got to the meeting. By using the comments section, we can adjust as the meeting goes a different direction. Comments is where we can very clearly see, all right, once this individual is done talking, here's another point. Is this more important than the next one we need to get to? Everyone can see that point as something that one side wants to address at some point, and we can again use that as a dynamic, transparent to-do list throughout the entire activity of the meeting there. So once you're done, most important, make sure you're disconnected. Once you think you're disconnected, check again. There are many times where people believe they've left the meeting and they haven't. And they go on and have another discussion that probably shouldn't be outside of those individuals. If you would not say it in the room before you left, make sure you're completely disconnected. Even if you have to turn the computer off to verify it, make sure you're off before you have a conversation that you don't want to have public. Now, this is really just supposed to be a short piece on how to use video effectively. There's a lot of other pieces to going digital. There's a lot of pieces like, how do we gather data differently? Should we always have paper that goes back and home in backpacks? If we're going digital, the backpack isn't going anywhere. How do we gather data? How do we save documents? Do we still need to have plastic buckets that are like filling up closets everywhere? Probably not. If we have documents that were generated electronically, if we have documents generated electronically, how do we prove that's real? How do we prove someone had the authority to sign it? Privacy, access. There's a lot of pieces that we need to think of someday in going digital. It's not the point to be scared of it. We don't want to be scared, but we do want to be thoughtful. We want to make sure that as we're bringing on these new pieces, we think of how they can benefit us, how we can make sure that they can benefit the team, make sure the team can collaborate more effectively in a way that is appropriate for the tool we are going to be using. So for today, for video, as we start to get going, as we realize more and more students are going to need access, collaborating more effectively with your IEP team can be done in video without being in the same room, because at the end of the day, our students need to retain access to FAPE. And to do that, we need to make sure we know how to use the tools that we're going to have to start using here. If you have any follow-up questions, again, my role as a mediator, we have other individuals at IEP Equity who are better able to address issues like the 2017 policies. That's Susan Gens is a real expert on how schools can be supported and whether there's pieces or tricks or techniques that can be useful there that the IEP Equity may have. Beth Connell would be great to reach out to for support if it's a parent who has questions or other areas where there may be questions, concerns, or things that either of them can help with. But thank you very much for your time today. And we'll have a bit of time here to actually look through some of the comments and questions that people may have here, answer as many as we can. And again, if we can't get to your questions today, we want to be mindful of everyone's time and leave on time here. Please feel free to keep leaving your questions there. Please feel free to direct message IEP Equity, and Susan and Beth can answer those pieces that are important there. And we'll keep this conversation going as long as it's useful. So with that, let me take a quick look and see what we have for any questions from various sources here. I'm seeing, let's see, uh, platform recommendations so platform recommendations. Video conferencing platform tools are really all fundamentally the same nowadays. They differ in how they are laid out sometimes. They vary in how they charge. I'd be hard pressed to believe that anyone hasn't been getting 50,000 advertisements from Zoom lately. Zoom's offering a lot of software free right now, or a lot of access for free right now. It's a very good product. People are very comfortable with it. The most important part of the software itself is make sure that you know how it works, make sure that you are comfortable using it the way you intend to use it. But apart from that, they don't matter as long as it's cost effective, it has equitable access, it's something that can be used with the tools and resources people have. Those are the far more important pieces than anything else. From our perspective, and what we hope is able to be identified today, all of them will have comments, all of them will have video, and all of them will have a way that if you use them in that planned, deliberate manner, if we use those tools effectively, regardless of which tool you're using, you want to make sure you're using the tool for accounting for the human opportunities and the human challenges that we have anytime we jump into a technology like that. That's going to be far more important to think through than which specific platform you're going to be using. Had a DM question on information on 2017 clarification. Again, I'm a mediator. I'm not a lawyer. So the 2017 clarification, Susan will be able to put something out in comments on that clarification. But there is a Department of Ed clarification with respect to providing services in times of federal emergency, which I think a lot of schools are looking to for guidance right now. We'll make sure that that gets shared. Other comments? One question here as far as a mediator. Mediators and advocates. So just as a quick idea when we're talking about closing the informational gap, mediators and advocates are two halves of solving a very important problem in the IEP meetings. Advocates are vitally important in doing what mediators can't, which is making sure that everyone is informed as to what their positions really sort of are, could be, what the opportunities are. Both on the district side is going to have individuals who know this is what we can't do from a district side, and parents really need good advice from from the side of a advocate, helping them understand what are our rights and what should we have access to, what can we expect to have access to. A mediator is someone who has the ability, has a legal responsibility to be holding any information from any party that may be in conflict, that may be not being able to hear each other effectively, keep those communications in confidence, and help those individuals understand what type of new way of communicating this, what type of way can we close this gap. So unlike an advocate, while in an IEP case a parent may bring an IEP mediator into the room, that individual is there to try and avoid the conflicts through making sure those communication gaps are closed that will sometimes lead to the due processes or challenges with getting the right services for that student, getting appropriate support for them. So the mediator plays that dual confidentiality role more so than a facilitator who's trying to make sure everyone can sort of talk in a room. The mediator is legally responsible for being able to communicate with all sides in confidence to make sure everyone is able to bridge those gaps where they just aren't hearing each other the way is most useful and productive for each other. We'll take a look at some other comments here. Let's see where we're at. Looks like there's some comments about available online, which are being addressed. And I know we're right on the edge of the time that we were intending to use today. So again, if you have any other comments, please feel free, have them in the comments section, send direct messages. We'll make sure we get the right expert who's able to actually connect with you and make sure we can help you get your questions answered to be able to close a communication gap, whether it be through using video conferencing tools like Zoom and all those other tools that are going to become very prevalent in our lives right now, or whether there's other communication gaps that we can specifically help you address as well. So thank you all very much for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you. Good day.